And we're running a few minutes ahead of schedule. Catherine Walsh-Ryan is not here yet. But I see Mr. Gadrich is here. I just talked to him a minute ago, and he said he's ready to move forward. His appointment's not till 7:15, but if you're ready, come on down, and we'll get started right here to the table and speak into the microphone. Just tell us who you are and why you want to be on the Jefferson County Development Authority.
My name's Chris Gadrich. I'm a senior account manager for Universal Forest Products. And I've been with Universal this is my I deal with a lot of manufacturing companies. My business segment for Universal is dealing with wood packaging for light manufacturing. So some of those folks are in Virginia, some of them are in West Virginia. I just met a customer of ours a few minutes ago. So I get around Pennsylvania. I do quite a bit of traveling. And I've always thought that it was high time that I gave back something after taking so much from the state of West Virginia. I'm getting towards the end of my career in sales and looking forward to doing some other things. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, great. I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
And this what I'm going to read from now is the Jefferson County Vision's lawsuit against the Development Authority and various county, the County Commission, the Board of Education, the Assessor, the Sheriff. And this is a paragraph from that complaint, and it's with the pilot, regarding the pilot agreement. And this paragraph 15 states, upon information and belief, if Rockwell is permitted to operate at the site, the facility will generate noxious air and water emissions, will produce unsightly sounds, odors, lighting, etc., and will create significant truck traffic to and from the site, all of which will diminish the quality of life and threaten the health and safety of the plaintiffs and of JCV members and their children. Do you believe that's an accurate statement?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I know a little bit about Rockwool. Actually, I've reached out.
Speak a little closer.
Sure. I know a little bit about Rockwool and about their process. I've spoken to some folks that work for Rockwool. They reached out to Universal probably 6 months ago about our company providing them with wood pallets. So one of the very first things that we did was, what's your business? What do you make? What do you do? And we asked for a visit to their plant. I think it's in Missouri or Mississippi, and we haven't been able to get there yet. So I don't know anything except what I've heard on the news and read in the newspaper and seen on the internet.
There are a couple of letters to the Development Authority, and I'm going to read a couple. They're from different lawyers, and I'm going to read from those letters and ask you a question at the end. The law recognizes the need of executive sessions to preserve the confidentiality of certain privileged and sensitive topics, including conversations that are attorney-client privileged. To ensure compliance with the law and your legal obligations to the JCDA, all members should refrain from disclosing any confidential information discussed during executive session to any party outside the JCDA. Do you believe that's an accurate statement?
Well, I believe that if there are rules that have been promulgated and approved, and executive session is a common occurrence, then someone who is in the executive session should abide by the rules. Is that what you're asking me?
Yes,
Yeah, sure.
basically, yeah. Okay. And along those lines, if you were, find my other, here it is, too many papers. If you were appointed to the JCDA, would you agree to follow the advice of the lawyer for the JCDA, even though you may not agree with that advice?
That's an excellent question that I've never considered before. I would probably go to a lawyer. No, I'm just kidding. I can't answer that question. I've never thought about it. Ask it again, please.
Okay. If you were appointed to the JCDA, would you follow the advice of the lawyer for the JCDA, even though you may not agree with that advice?
As long as I wasn't breaking the law, I would follow the lawyer's advice.
Thank you. And just a couple more things here. If you were appointed to the JCDA, would you agree to the contracts and agreements that were put in place by the board members prior to your appointment?
Certainly.
Okay. And just one more thing. No, that's all. Thank you. Josh?
Just a few things. So it looks like you're a Berkeley County resident.
That's correct, Martinsburg.
So I guess 35 years, have you been working in Jefferson County for 35 years?
I've been working in Jefferson County off and on for the last 23 years.
23 years?
Yeah.
So I
For
guess
6 years, I was working in Tennessee and Virginia for the company.
I guess how the JCDA is written, the bylaws, it's contiguous counties to Jefferson. So, okay. So that's fine. I just want to make sure that everything's okay with that.
Sure.
So what initially drew you to apply for the Jefferson County JCDA rather than maybe Berkeley County?
Proximity more. I spend a lot more time in Jefferson County at this facility than I do at my home, sadly. So you could ask my wife.
All our lives, right?
Yeah. So when we first moved to the Eastern Panhandle, we moved to Ranson. And we lived in Ranson for about 2 years before anywhere else. And I've got a lot of very close friends that live in Jefferson County. And my wife was an attorney here in Jefferson County for a number of years. So between work and relationships, feel very close to Charlestown, Ranson, and the county itself.
Okay, I guess, is your company currently engaged in any sort of contract or anything with Rockwool or any other?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
Okay, what else do I want to ask? Yeah, that's about it. That's all I have.
Sure.
Just to be upfront, I've known Chris for many years. His wife actually, I think, graduated law school with me.
I think she
Close to
did,
it.
yes.
And she was an assistant prosecutor before I was. So.
Yeah. You got a good memory, Ralph.
Then she
Thanks.
got smart and started teaching, didn't she?
She did, yes. She's a retired school teacher. Yeah.
And I won't hold it against you, you're a runner. But
I am a runner, yes.
yeah. Chris, I guess the issue for the general audience and things is your views on heavy industry versus light industry in our industrial parks. Do you have a view on that?
I do, actually. What I do in my job is I work with, it's all business to business, sales. I work with 95% of my customers are what we would characterize as light manufacturing. I have one customer that is heavy manufacturing, that's Volvo, and they are in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. I'm not an expert, but I'm the closest thing you're going to get, to be honest with you, because I deal with a lot of folks that that are in different kinds of manipulation of steel, manipulation of fiberglass, wood, and they make different kinds of things. You know, everything from vending machines to boats and trailers, and this is in Baltimore, Washington, Northern Virginia. I see an awful lot of that, and I'm a big fan, obviously, because it pays my paycheck, has put my kids through college, and it's taking care of my grandkids now. So I know a fair amount about light manufacturing and how people do business and how people stay in business and how they make money in light manufacturing. And I think that some of the places that we have in Jefferson County are outstanding examples of the kinds of things that we can bring here to Jefferson County. And, you know, they aren't controversial at all. And again, they just make a good product, they take it to market, they pay salaries to people, and they support those families. That,
Well, my other usual question, it has to do with the comprehensive plan. Are you familiar with that?
I have scanned it.
Okay.
I gave it my quick night before the German examination in high school look. So yes, I know it a little bit.
Do you have any views on it? Well,
I'm
let me
surprised
ask
by
you-
I'm surprised by one thing.
Yes.
There's not a lot of focus on manufacturing in that plan.
And what would your view be on that be? Because we'll get asked.
Light manufacturing, again, is the lifeblood of what we do. I mean, this is Jefferson County, if you compare Jefferson and Berkeley counties, you know, Jefferson County is more of a more rural with a larger, I guess in the last 15, 20 years, pretty significant influx of folks coming here to work in the federal institutions that have been opened up. At the same time, Jefferson County has lagged behind some in light manufacturing. Universal's been here for, I guess now this is our 30th year. AMS, the different companies that are over in the park, there needs to be more of that. There needs to be more of those kind of companies. And I'm surprised that there isn't more emphasis on bringing those kinds of companies.
Well, I'll be asked when I go to the bar and people get me in a corner, what's your view on heavy manufacturing?
Well, when you deal with heavy manufacturing, you have to deal with the whole ball of wax. And if there are emissions, a perfect example, I think, would be in Berkeley County. When we moved back to Berkeley County from Tennessee and from Charlottesville, those 6 or 7 years we were away, we found this gigantic tower. And my wife thought that we were in a Tolkien movie, and it was Mordor. She didn't know what that was, and I didn't know what it was. It was the cement factory up there, which employs a lot of people, but you know, you pay a price. There's a deal to be made, and if you don't go into it with eyes open, then shame on you.
I think that's all the questions.
Okay. Caleb?
I believe you've already answered it, but if you can expound upon it a little bit.
Sure.
If you could get anything you wanted, what kind of economic development would you want in the county?
Well, it's 2019, and I think that we do an okay job of attracting high tech. The American University, that was outstanding. That's a home run. We can do and we should do better. But there's always that place for other light manufacturing facilities to be brought here. The more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. Now, of course, we're always going to have to deal with who's going to work in those facilities. The Eastern Panhandle is right in the middle of a horrible situation as far as opioid addiction. I go to plants where I run into folks that are recovering addicts. My daughter Sarah is a recovering addict. I've lived that. It's hard to find people in 2019, but if you bring the right business and you have the right people running those businesses and they put the right kinds of programs together that will attract the correct people, I think that you can be successful. I think we've done a pretty good job of that ourselves at Universal in Ranson. It's a challenge, it's a tough job, It's a cold job or it's a hot job. It's a wet job some days. And when I started out in the mill, even though I had a master's degree in political science. Every salesman starts out in the mill. And you can find out very quickly whether or not someone is going to stay. If you can make it in the mill, you can make it just about any place.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Gadrich.
Gadrich, I'm sorry.
Gadrich.
Yep.
I don't know.
I
There we
know.
go. It keeps on flicking off on me, my microphone. Just for full disclosure, our farm does do some business with Universal Forest Products. You may know my husband, but I don't know you.
Okay.
So, one thing, and you disclosed early on that, Rockwell approached you about pallets.
Yes.
If Universal Products decided to enter into a contract with Rockwell or any other business, that would become an agenda item on, just with Rockwell, and you're employed at Universal, what would you do? Something about Rockwell came up on the agenda, and...
I would recuse myself.
Okay, all right. If you had a current contract, and then I assume you have other current contracts with other businesses in the county that may come up on the JCDA agenda?
Likely.
Likely, okay. Just so we're...
Same answer.
Right, okay, all right. Now, can you tell me, and I know you've started from the mill and worked your way up, and I certainly appreciate that, because I'm sure that's how you weed out a lot of folks that aren't going to make it. But tell me your experience of working within a group or on a board. You're not the supervisor, you're with your peers.
Sure. The only board that I've ever served on, I'm sad to say, was the Epic Soccer Board when that started. Probably, I'm trying to think, Patrick is 36, so that was probably 25 years ago. And that started in Shepherdstown. So I was on the original board with a bunch of good folks and coached, and then eventually the kids got old enough that I didn't have to do that any longer.
Tell me what kind of, do you feel you have skills or your winning personality that would work well on the board, or anything like that?
Well, I'm a salesman, so
Yeah.
you need to be careful if my lips are moving. It's a very dangerous place to be. And the closer I am to you, the more likely I am to stick my hand in your pocket, so be careful. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I work pretty well with people. Part of the challenge of this particular Universal Forest Products, Universal, by the way, we just announced last week our 2018 numbers for the entire company. And it was another record-setting year. We finally got over $4 billion in sales, $4.3 billion. This plant is one of 125 facilities. It's a booming facility. It's a real firecracker right now. But one of the challenges we have is we only have one person who is a qualified engineering designer. So we have one man who's a Virginia Tech graduate who I hired.
Oh, my.
Are you really?
Engineer.
I'll have to leave, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, and we've got 7 salespeople, and 7 salespeople are vying for his attention. So we do a lot of cooperating and occasional backstabbing, but mostly cooperating.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just for full disclosure, I already mentioned it, I know, Chris. My son did his Eagle project, and this was more than 25 years ago. They donated the materials for it.
Okay.
And my younger son did play Epic Soccer, probably the time you were on the board there.
Yeah.
I think that's all the conflicts I have.
That's all you can
Few.
think of, right?
Yeah.
We're best friends, right?
Well, his wife was my doctor for a short period.
It's a small town.
It is a small town,
It is a
right?
small town.
It is.
So, well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for your interest in serving on the board of the JCC. And thanks again for coming.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, sincerely. Thanks so much.
Is Christopher Garcia here yet? I'm going backwards. Ms. Ryan, Catherine Ryan? Yes, come on down. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, how are you? Good. So you can just state your name for the record into the microphone and tell us why you want to serve on the Jefferson County Development Authority.
Well, my name is Catherine Walsh Ryan. I tend to just go by Catherine Ryan. And I find the idea of the board very interesting. I'm primarily interested in TV and film media services, and with we're hoping the reinstatement of the West Virginia Film Tax Credit, that will once again be a viable industry in this neck of the woods. It's very good for tourism, good commerce dollars. With all of the TV series and the feature films that I've worked on since living in West Virginia, I can attest that I was able to train many of the students that I had through Ryan Film Institute, which I taught at Shepherd University for a time, until the legislation voted to close the film office, and we were totally defunded of our scholarship dollars. And that looks like it's turning around again in this legislative session. So that's really one of my prime interests is TV series production, video, motion pictures, feature motion pictures, I think are very important to this area. We have many trained people in the workforce who do everything from lighting, audio, DPs, director of photography. I was able to bring quite a few of my students into professional feature films and videos that were filmed in this area, and it was such a great learning experience for them that those high schoolers then went on to go to college or vocational training, and they are working coast to coast in the industry. So I have seen firsthand what that can do for our youth. And I think it's a shame that so many young people move on and move out because an industry leaves the state or leaves the area. Now, I heard that some of the people in Charleston were jealous of us here in the Eastern Panhandle. And I always say, don't be jealous just because we're beautiful and we bring in all the money for all these productions. I mean, it does go back to the state anyway, to Charleston. So it looks like that will be coming back. And so that's really been a main focus of mine. And I like it for the training opportunities for both youth and adults. It's, oh my goodness, the amount of restaurant meals, catering services, transportation, hotel nights booked, equipment, durable equipment gets rented, supplies. It's much bigger than a small business. I mean, it's really has put a lot of money on the books for the state, and it looks like it may be coming back. So I'd like to see more of it return to this area. And anyway. So that's been kind of a main focus of mine since we lost the funding. And in fact, I was recruited to teach broadcast journalism at Washington High School. And I started there in September. So I have been renovating Studio G120. And we're working with computers from 2010. And they crash and they burn and they just, it's difficult. So I also want to see the funding stay in public schools. That's another drive of mine. I don't like the idea of charter schools. Maybe they work someplace. I've not heard many success stories. But I want the funding in arts and technology in the Eastern Panhandle. So I would say those are kind of my education and film and TV. Very excited about both of those.
Okay, great. I have a couple, we all have some questions for you. I'm going to start. And this has to do, the question that I have for you first has to do with there's a lawsuit that has been filed against the Jefferson County Development Authority, the Board of Education, the County Commission, the sheriff, the assessor, Ranson City Council, and this has to do with the pilot agreement. And paragraph 15 of that lawsuit states the following, and then I'll ask you a question about it. I'm going to read this to you. Upon information and belief, if Rockwool is permitted to operate at the site, the facility will generate noxious air and water emissions, will produce unsightly sounds, odors, lighting, etc., and will create significant truck traffic to and from the site, all of which will diminish the quality of life and threaten the health and safety of plaintiff and of JCV members and their children. Do you believe that's an accurate statement?
I have read quite a bit about this situation, and I'm not a scientist. I don't pretend to be. I have a journalism degree and a master's in strategic leadership. So, but I understand there are many concerns about those issues, but I just want to say this about lawsuits in general. The only people who make money are the attorneys, and frankly, for the amount of money spent, there are times when I would wish it would go to public schools, for instance. So it's a problem in the community, absolutely. But I would rather see the money go elsewhere than lawsuits. That's just a general across-the-board feeling I have.
Do you believe that, or if you're appointed, would be appointed to the JCDA, will you agree to the contracts and agreements that were put in place by board members prior to your appointment? Let me explain that a little bit. The JCDA often enters into contracts and agreement with prospective businesses. And there are contracts and agreements that are currently in place that were put there by board members. And so if you were appointed to the board, would you agree to those contracts and agreements that are already currently in place?
Sure, I see no reason why not.
And there are a couple of letters that, or a couple of comments from lawyers that have been written to JCDA board members, and I'm going to read those to you, and you can just tell me whether you agree with them or not. Well, I ask you a question at the end. The law requires the need of executive sessions to preserve the confidentiality of certain privileged and sensitive topics, including conversations that are attorney-client privileged. To ensure compliance with the law and your legal obligations to the JCDA, all members should refrain from disclosing any confidential information discussed during executive session to any party outside the JCDA. Do you, would you follow that advice if you were appointed to the JCDA?
Of course. I don't have problems with confidentiality. I know what HIPAA agreements are in the medical field, for instance.
Okay.
Yeah.
The duty of care, this is another portion of another letter. States have recognized that the members of nonprofit boards at a minimum owe a fiduciary duty to the entity they govern, and this fiduciary duty includes a duty of care, a duty of loyalty, and a duty of obedience. The duty of care can be rather broad, but at its heart, it's a duty to perform the due diligence and to protect the assets of the entity. The duty of loyalty means that the directors must put the interest of the entity above their own personal interests at all times. The duty of obedience means that the directors must ensure that the entity doesn't engage in illegal or unauthorized activities and fulfill its obligations. Would that be a problem for you?
I don't see that as a problem, no.
And then just one more question.
Okay.
And I'm finished, then
Okay.
I'll pass it off to my far right.
All right.
Last 30 seconds.
You get the last 30 seconds. No, you get the, well, whatever. If the JCDA, if you're appointed to the board, will you agree to follow the advice of the lawyer for the JCDA, even though you may not agree with that advice?
Yes.
Okay. That's all.
Because I'm also not an attorney, I don't pretend to know as much as an attorney would.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Commissioner Compton?
Yeah, so I'm just slightly off the subject, just looking at your resume.
Yes.
So this brings me back to like senior year in college. I needed an acting or some elective just to fulfill graduation. I walked into Acting 101,
Yeah.
and the professor was like, all right, everybody, get in a circle and sit Indian style. I ran out of there, and it's like, this is just not for me. So nothing against actors, but you've done a lot of stuff here. That's nice. I guess my only thing, your introduction was quite helpful, and Commissioner Nolan, with her 14 minutes, was pretty helpful also. But the JCDA, if you were appointed, what do you think you could do as far as bringing change, or what do you think needs to be changed there?
Well, I believe in blue ocean strategies, and I grew up outside of Chicago, where the steel mills linger along the Lake Michigan shoreline, so I'm very, very familiar with heavy industry, and my entire family worked in the steel mills, and I'm proud to say so, all immigrants, and they worked there and provided for all of us to go to school, and I think that serves a purpose. We lived in Indianapolis before Dr. Ryan, my husband, was recruited to start a diabetes program in the Eastern Panhandle to treat the diabetes epidemic. And so I have worked with him, for several decades, starting up new businesses, and we're on the second medical practice in the Eastern Panhandle. I'm sorry, would you restate your question again? I'm getting a little off.
Yeah, you're
Point.
just, if you're appointed to the JCDA, what changes
Oh, yes,
would you
Blue
make?
Ocean Strategy. Okay, so after college, I moved to Indianapolis, and Indianapolis was right on the border of being an India no place and a really great downtown kind of city. And I was very involved in the revitalization of Indianapolis, everything through the White River State Park Games, the Indianapolis Zoo. I served on those boards of directors. We saw a lot of change and improvement on a very large scale. That was also the first movie I was ever in, 8 Men Out. They went to Indianapolis, even though it was about the disgraced Black Sox of 1919. They found a field in Indianapolis that was a baseball field from 1919, and that was the first major motion picture I was ever in. So I learned a lot in that experience. But I'm always interested in sampling new things. We travel a lot. I like to get an idea of what builds a community, what is good for the citizens, how do we incorporate the history and the beauty and move forward from there. Ryan Film Institute grew out of my master's thesis, and the Teen Filmmakers Workshop had the highest positive rating out of all of the youth that I talked with, and that ran very solidly for 10 years. So I guess I like to look at things that exist and see where's the next step. Where can we go next to benefit the entire community?
And just Indianapolis, I was there 2 weeks ago. The city is gorgeous now. It's like a
Right.
big city with a small town feel
Right?
to it. So.
Exactly.
But thank you.
Again, for disclosure, I know Mrs. Ryan. We're in a group or two together, and my wife occasionally sends patients to her husband. So we've known each other for many years. What I usually ask people first is the chart on the wall there is the comprehensive plan. I point out it's not a law. It's right over the young lady's head there.
Okay, yes.
But it's the wish and aspirations of the county, what we'd like to see our county be. Have you had the opportunity to look at that, and what's your feeling about the county in general?
Well, I would like to see a lot more green tourism, and I get a little annoyed when I hear people say, well, I drove down to Virginia to go wine tasting, and they have these trolleys, and they do this and that, and it's so exciting. Why can't we do that here? I mean, I just see that we could do more in terms of tourism, fun activities, commerce, in addition to the filmmaking that I'd like to see happen. If you go to California and tour Napa and Sonoma, it's just a wonderful experience, and I don't see why we can't do something like that here. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I would be in favor of something new.
I'll ask you this because I've asked the other three people that are here today. What's your view on light industry versus heavy industry?
Well, I mentioned that I'm a steel worker's daughter, so I mean, I know what heavy industry, I mean, in terms of what it can provide to many people who need a lifestyle. However, I don't really think that Jefferson County is ideal for extensive heavy industry. I like the idea of light industry. I like the idea of more healthcare services. I like the idea of IT development. We could do a lot more in terms of educational services. Oh, so many things and so little time. For a time when I lived in Indianapolis, I worked for Indiana Farm Bureau Co-op. So the agribusiness is also deep in my heart. I toured all the counties in the state and learned a lot about farming practices. And, you know, who knows, maybe there are some other initiatives that other states are trying that could be beneficial and bring in a lot of money in this area. I would leave that to the agribusiness experts, but I think change is in the wind, and I'd like to be a part of it.
A question I'll have to ask. The meetings currently are at 3 p.m., and I know you're working at Washington High.
But Tuesday is okay.
Okay, that's the
Tuesday's
question.
okay. I usually work till 5 or 5:30 other days, but Tuesday's great.
Commissioner Hudson?
I believe she answered my question with
Okay,
one of those.
all right.
Well, That's going to work for me tonight? Okay. I see you were in Leadership Jefferson,
Yes.
2016.
Loved it.
So you ate at my house, right?
Yes.
That's where you know me from.
Yes, I know. I was looking at you going, I was there. Yes. I was on your farm. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Okay. You definitely have a different skill set than I'm familiar with, working in film and so forth. But tell me what kind of, what skill set or attributes you feel you would bring to the JCDA board, where you're working with a group of 11 of your, you know, you're the 12th member, 11 of your peers.
Well, right out of journalism school, I chose the field of corporate communications. I was a magazine editor right out of college, and when I worked at the agribusiness at the Farm Bureau Co-op. And I found that because of my writing, photography experience, and crafting a message, I did a lot of image branding, and I think that this group is suffering from not so positive presentation of your outlooks and your goals. And I saw that as a situation that I could help with as a board member because I've worked in crisis communications. I worked the Indy 500-mile race for 10 years. I had international news media work. Whenever an injured race car driver was in the house for 30 days or more, I was getting phone calls from Colombia and every place. And my Spanish is not that good, but somehow we persevered and, you know, got the job done. But yeah, so I have the writing skills and communication skills, news media work. The filmmaking I came into actually as an outshoot of reporters wanting information about critically ill patients. And they demanded to see the patients. The patients needed their privacy. They needed to rest up and get better. So I came up with the idea of video news releases. Really one of the first hospitals in the country to do it. Again, blue ocean strategy, you know, what's the problem? How do we come up with a solution that works for everybody? I'm big on collaboration and compromise. Otherwise, you can't move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's all the questions that we have for you. Would you like to say anything in closing?
Well, I would welcome the opportunity to work with you all. I think you're doing some really good things. I could perhaps work with you on crafting a message, and I'd be really happy to work with you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your interest and thanks for being here this evening. Okay, Lucas Cade. Mr. Cade, come on down.
Thank you.
You're welcome. you can speak into the mic. Tell us who you are and why you want to serve on the Jefferson County Development Authority.
Sure, thank you very much, and thank you folks for having me tonight. My name is Lucas Cade. I am a Senior Economic Development Advisor for First Energy, or Potomac Edison. I have long been associated with economic development up and down the valley here, and in Jefferson County and in Berkeley, and done some work in Maryland and when we used to have Virginia territory. So I've been around for a while and even go all the way back to the Jane Peters days. So I really think that Jefferson County is a fascinating location, simply because there's a great mixture of historical appreciation. There's a mixture of a particular promise with the kinds of development and the kinds of growth that you can incur here, things that you can actually do. If you were able to actually look at the resume that I sent, you'll find that my long ago background is in education and social sciences. So I have an affinity for place and location. So, and I have worked here, and as you can also see, I live across the river in Washington County. But because I have worked for a long, long time for Potomac Edison and for what is now First Energy in the economic development world, and I've done other things associated with economic development, I think that working in this county and working with the folks with the commission, I've got pretty good relationships with the state of West Virginia. I've got good relationships with the current director, Mr. Deal. I've worked closely with any number of the Region 9 Planning Group, so I have a pretty good oversight about what this county is about and what it can achieve.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with a few questions that I have.
Sure.
And I think our microphones are, let's see. Well, there it is. And this has to do, the question that I have for you has to do, these are important questions to me because they go to the crux of the members of the Development Authority. So this is the this has to do with the Jefferson County Vision's lawsuit against Rockwool, the County Commission, the Development Authority, Board of Education, the Sheriff, the Assessor, and Ranson, and it's in regards to the pilot agreement. So this paragraph 15 states, upon information and belief, if Rockwool is permitted to operate at the site, the facility will generate noxious air and water emissions, will produce unsightly sounds, odors, lighting, etc., and will create significant truck traffic to and from the site, all of which will diminish the quality of life and threaten the health and safety of plaintiff and of JCV members and their children. Do you believe that that's a factual statement?
I would say that's not a factual statement. I would say it's not a factual statement because over the course of a business's decision to locate in a particular spot or a particular location, it usually has to do with a lot of different things. Access to markets, availability of raw materials, availability of labor, a variety of things. And as part of the process that they go through in order to locate, they actually have to be vetted for the things that you're talking about, for emissions. If they have emissions from a manufacturing process, they have to be vetted for compliance with an awful lot of regulations that the state or locality actually has to have. And having worked on the electric side for this, I was able to see. I was actually part of the group that actually worked with Rockwool early on to be able to, for their needs for electricity. I'm one of the first people that actually work with businesses that would come in and want to locate or expand. So as you go through that process, you're actually able to identify troubles, issues that may arise. Most localities, in particular this one, actually has the opportunity to learn and to understand, are these are the benefits worth the benefits? Are there too many negatives that would make us maybe think twice or would prohibit us to offer or to be able to accept or to offer them to be able to locate, to make investment into the community? But as it pertains to the statement there, I would say that's probably false, because most of that, and I can't say that I can say that, speak to every bit of it, but I'd say most of that was already vetted through the state regulatory process, through local processes, to be able to determine that. And also, I would also say that there were opportunities to be able to review that particular company's operations in other places. They are domestic here in the States, and they are, I think they're a Danish company. So I think the opportunity to review, the opportunity to understand if they're in compliance with the existing regulations, both state and local, I would be very surprised if that statement is true based upon the process they would have had to go through.
Okay. I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from a couple of letters that were written by attorneys to the Jefferson County Development Authority. And I'll read you the statement and then I'll ask you about it. The law requires the need of executive sessions to preserve the confidentiality of certain privileged and sensitive topics, including conversations that are attorney-client privileged. To ensure compliance with the law and your legal obligations to the JCDA, all members should refrain from disclosing any confidential information discussed during executive session to any party outside the JCDA. Would you be able to follow that advice from? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I've spent 30 years doing that as part of economic development, so that's compliance for that. That is not a problem.
Okay. And if you're appointed to the JCDA, would you agree to follow the lawyer's advice for the JCDA, even if you don't have that advice?
Well, if I'm representing the JCDA, I do follow with that, and I would agree to the terms and the conditions of service to the organization. So I would follow the advice from the attorney, because they're the attorney's advice that represents that organization.
And from another letter, this comment: states have recognized that the members of nonprofit boards at a minimum owe a fiduciary duty to the entity they govern, and this fiduciary duty includes a duty of care, a duty of loyalty, and obedience. The duty of care can be rather broad, but at its heart, it's a duty to perform due diligence and to protect the assets of the entity. The duty of loyalty means that the directors must put the interest of the entity above their own personal interest at all times. The duty of obedience means that the directors must ensure that the entity does not engage in illegal or unauthorized activities and fulfills its obligations. Would you have an issue with your duties and responsibilities as a member of the board? Were you to be, with regard to fiduciary duty?
No, ma'am. No problem whatsoever.
Okay. And if appointed to the JCDA, will you agree to the contracts and agreements that were put in place by the board members prior to your appointment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all I have. Yeah. I've asked everybody the same thing.
Okay, so
It's your turn.
so I have a slight utility background also. So I see you come from an IOU. Isn't it ironic how IOU, investor-owned utility?
That's correct.
So shareholder-driven IOU.
Yes, sir.
So are we ever going to get AMI meters in West Virginia?
That doesn't look to be anytime soon.
Yeah,
no, sir.
exactly, right? So I guess, like I asked the other individual from outside the county, what initially drew you to apply to Jefferson County's JCDA?
Well, I kind of inferred that in my opening remarks, but there is I've had a long period of time where I've worked with the Jefferson County Development Authority and other ancillary groups that have worked here, but I have always been compelled and really attracted by Jefferson County because of its history, because of its assets, because of its capabilities, and I really have enjoyed it. And so having the benefit of working at the macro level for a utility for many, many years, at the state and in regional level, multi-county, organizational levels, having been able to do that, I've been able to see locations that are very good, some that are not so good, some that do well, some that don't. And Jefferson County has quite a few attributes, and I think that it's poised for a really, really solid future based upon the different kinds of industry, the different kinds of economic activity.
Just to be fair to you, you mentioned serving Rockwell or something. Just coming from a utility background, they're indifferent to who they serve. They must serve them. So you can't pick and choose if someone wants service as far as utilities go.
That is correct.
So
The Public Service Commission requires us to provide service if requested.
I totally understand that too,
Sure.
just from the utility side. But I guess you answered a lot in Commissioner Nolan's question, so I don't want to just draw for grasps. But that's basically all I have for you.
I don't think you were here initially, but over the young lady's head over there is a map chart of the plan for the county that was put together to basically take in what the county population thought their county should look like. It's not a statute, it's not a law, but do you have any view on that?
Well, land use planning is obviously quite important, particularly because there are only a finite number of resources in any kind of economic activity that you want to look to, whether it's agriculture, whether it's office locations, whether it's places for retail, whether it's residential locations. So land use planning is absolutely important. And when you put together a strategic plan, which I'm assuming that is actually from, when you put a strategic plan together, then you're taking a coordinated effort from the population as well as the official representation across this. It's a group of people across the board that actually put something together, and it may not be legally binding. It's not a statute, but it's pretty close to it because it's designed by the very people that live there. So it usually is a reflection of the kind of things that are important to them and what they want to retain, what they want to keep, and places where they want ways and places where they see growth, things that they can accept, and it's pretty important.
I understand what Mr. Compton asked you about, that you have to serve Rockwool or other companies that come in, but how do you address people who don't trust the power company, think you all are pushing to have everybody be industrialized? How do you address that?
Well, for certain, one of the reasons why the power company, probably the main reason why the power company does economic development, it's not to serve large customers, although that's always a plus, because if it's an investor-owned utility, you make money by selling energy, selling electricity. But as I stated to Mr. Compton there, that first of all, we're certainly required to do it, but we understand that we support economic development because what it does is it expands the economic base of a locality or a region or a state. Whenever we provide service to a new commercial customer or an industrial customer, an office space or a data center or what have you, that generates more than just electricity, which benefits us. It generates tax base, it generates jobs, it generates a higher standard of living. So there are multipliers that are associated with that, economic multipliers that come from that. So businesses that locate, businesses that expand, basically are putting more dollars out there and increasing and really making the standard of living better. Sometimes you get a larger customer that does that, but more often than not, it's the medium to small customers that we serve that actually do that. So we don't just particularly go for the ones that are large, and we don't particularly go for the ones that are industrialized. There is a variety of load profiles that are attractive to us.
Another issue that may come up is there's objection to the gas pipeline coming in, but but assuming it does, that's a competitor to the electric coming in. And there's a big push by community groups to have solar. What's your view on the interface of solar and power companies?
Well, first of all, on the natural gas side, there was a time when we were in direct competition for just about everything with gas, for heating, for industrial processes and so forth. But what we've, over the years, have kind of determined that natural gas, electricity, solar, most of these energy companies really want the same kinds of things, the development. They want the ability to sell their product, but they see the economies get better because of that. But the solar aspect is something that's absolutely new. Most utilities, including First Energy, even though we have recently divested ourselves of our generation in the last couple of years, we're strictly a delivery company now. Solar is an important part of a diversified energy supply, locally, statewide, nationally. Some places go faster than others, but solar is a viable part of that. I don't believe it's the only part of that, and I don't think it even at this point sustainable to take on the largest baseload components, but solar and wind and other renewables are part of a portfolio that are now effective, and they will become more important as time goes on.
Okay, all right, Caleb?
If you could have any kind of business in the county that you could get, what kind of economic development would you want in the county?
As far as the electric company goes, we would like those that actually buy our product. But as it relates to economic development, you want, as it relates to your strategic plan that you have there, you have a very nice delineation about economic development in there. And so you have, most of the time, you'll take your assets and determine what you have, and then you'll go and say, what industry, what kind of business is most appropriate for the things that we have to offer. You know, Jefferson County would never go and try to find, some sort of primary extraction. You don't have coal mines up here because you don't have coal, but you do have assets. You have, infrastructure, you have roads, rails, you have labor supplies. You basically analyze what is your strength, and you say what kind of businesses actually not only would like what we have to offer, but also fall in line with the kind of goals and objectives that we have here. So you can have light manufacturing, you can have advanced manufacturing, which is a new thing. You can all the way go down to commercial office. You have a really strong federal presence here, government presence, which has been here for quite a long time. And you've seen really, really positive economic benefits that come from that. But you also have, there's a world of technology out there. I'd certainly like to see, you're right over the mountain from Reston, Virginia, and Ashburn, Virginia, which is one of the data center capitals of the world. There's no reason in the world why some of that can't be here. So there are an awful lot of things that you can actually get. I think you're well positioned to go after those things, and based upon what like I say, the most recent plan that you have there, it looks like that's been thought of and thought out well.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in and interviewing. I have some really serious concerns with your current job and conflicts of interest while serving on the JCDA. I realize utilities have to provide service, but it appears to me, it's just my personal opinion, not trying to throw you under the bus, but I'd like you to explain how you would handle if a project came to the board and your company has got to provide electrical service. Do you see that as a conflict or not?
That's really a good question, and I have to say I do not see that as a conflict. And first, I'll point out that there are 6 others like me in First Energy that works over our entire footprint in Ohio and Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, and so forth. And all but one actually serve on boards right now, local boards or regional boards or so forth. So it's not uncommon for us to do that, mostly because, one, we have a handle on economic development and the processes, and so we can contribute as it relates to that. But we don't contribute to it like we're a representative of the utility. When you get on a board like this, your economic development world is that board in that county or whatever that entity is that you're doing. I can still perform my outreach job and my marketing business development job for the company that I work for, but there's certainly a very specific and fine line between the two. So they don't really. The other thing is that this whole business and what I've been doing for many, many years is based upon confidentiality, it's based upon integrity. And so it would destroy my ability to do what I can do and have other localities trust me that I'm doing the best I can on their behalf as it relates to overall development, business development, economic development. So it might appear as such, but I really don't think that it would be.
Well, I understand your expertise would certainly be good information to share with board members and so forth, but I still feel like if you would work with the Development Authority staff and so forth to bring when a business is coming in, then you're kind of changing your role. I mean, but that's my opinion, and I appreciate your explanation, even though I don't quite agree with it. Thank you. That's all. Oh, and then also, if you were on the board, what skills and you've got the expertise in utilities, but what other skills and expertise would you bring to work with 11 other members?
Well, the beauty of a development board is that there are 11 other members, or however many, is that you take the consensus of a group of people who actually have the best interest of the locality in mind, but it also allows folks like myself to not just learn from what other people's experiences are, but also it allows me to give input on not just utility, how the utility relates to economic development, but it also allows me, the first job that I ever had was working for Washington County, Hagerstown, Washington County's Economic Development Commission. So I understand how the local county economic development process, how it goes, how they interface with the states. I understand those kind of things. So I think that I could actually be a very good resource for the group. I really think that would be, I actually would look forward to that very much, but I think it would be, I really don't think, and even if there was a case where there could even be where I would consider that it would be a conflict of interest, there's certainly always the opportunity to recuse oneself if it was that way. So.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I think there's a slight misunderstanding about utilities from some of the commissioners and maybe even the public. So utilities are natural monopolies. They have to go to the Public Service Commission and justify the rate of returns they're earning. And then that Public Service Commission has to approve those rate of returns. So it's not just like a normal business, I want that big customer, we can make a fortune off of him. They have to go to the Public Service Commission and back up with costly lawyers and studies, etc., why they're earning that rate of return. And I'll be frank, most of these big commercial and industrial customers are paying far more than they should, and they're supplementing the residential customers. Just look at any single cost of service study in any jurisdiction. I've seen ones that are actually negative rates of return for residential customers. So they don't operate like how you would think a normal business does.
Josh, you're not volunteering to raise your rates, are you, for your house?
Okay, so if everybody likes solar, they have two-part rates and their energy charge is like 10 cents. You could wipe a lot of your bill out with solar panels with how the rate structures are currently. So,
And I'm
full
sure
disclosure, it's all in the tariff.
thanking you for that right now, Josh. Just kidding, though. Do you have anything else you'd like to say in closing?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to come and answer whatever questions you have, and appreciate the consideration, and I'm sure you'll make the best selections in as far as your commission, but I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for coming in. I appreciate your interest in serving on the board.
Thank you, ma'am.
In light of the fact that it is all voluntary. So, thanks so much. Did Christopher Garcia ever come in? Okay, well, that concludes our interviews for this evening. We will be back again tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, and I think we have four people, I believe, to interview tomorrow, and we'll adjourn for this evening.
Nobody asked him if he could make the meetings. The man doesn't even live in this state, and nobody asked him that question.
Okay.
Just wanna point
We'll
that
have
out.
another
He's still here.
opportunity if he's selected as one of the.
Well, do you want to ask him?
Oh,
Well, it's not my
Sure.
job, right?
No, I mean, he's right behind you, that's what I'm saying.
come on in.
They just like to ask you about you being able to make the meeting. They asked everybody else.
Thank you.